Number 5. The White Lady Ghost. Among the Warrens' career of demonology was this peculiar case involving a local Connecticut legend, the White Lady Ghost of Union Cemetery. Whoosh, that's a doozy of a title. Can't she just be a spooky ghost? Anyway, Union Cemetery dates back 400 years, and it's said to be haunted by this one notable ghost. The tricky thing is though, nobody quite knows the exact origin of who she is. Some speculate that she's a woman who lost her child in childbirth and hasn't been able to move on to the afterlife because she still seeks out her child. Others speculate that she's a ghost of a victim who had been dumped into a sinkhole near the cemetery, and she's been unable to move on while this crime goes unsolved. You know, the fact that we don't even know her name or who she is, that's probably bothering her. That's probably contributing to all her worldly stress. The only things anyone can agree on truly is that those who say they've seen her claim that she's dressed in a bright white nightgown and has her head and face concealed with a white bonnet. One particularly good ghost story, local legend, says that in the late 90s, a firefighter responding to a call nearby said a woman in a white dress jumped in front of the truck and landed behind him. When he leapt out of the vehicle, there was no body on the ground, but a dent in the hood. Naturally, such a popular local ghost story caught the attention of Connecticut natives Ed and Lorraine Warren, and this never-before-seen footage was released by Tony Spera, their son-in-law, and it's Ed filming the cemetery looking for proof of the White Lady. We'll play some of it for you now so you can get your eyes on it and you can try to make out what's happening. Ed Warren claims that in the footage you can see the ghost walking behind him in the shadows and turning to look at him. Lorraine Warren once said this evidence was so important that it had to be locked away to be studied by the New England Society of Paranormal Research. And I don't want to pop anyone's balloon here. It looks to me like they locked it away because it's not really that impressive. I personally couldn't really see anything in this, but let me know down below if you think this is smoking proof of a ghost walking through the graveyard, or if it's just some blurry lights through the fog. And if you're looking for more ghost videos, stories about Ed and Lorraine, hauntings, possessions, exorcisms, and basically anything freaky, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some on top of it. Click through, subscribe, and like, and I am certain you'll find something to suit your fears. Stay scared. Number 4. The Museum Tour. If you want to go to the world's foremost collection of haunted relics and cursed objects, there's probably no room more affected by evil than the legendary collection of the Warrens' Haunted Museum of souvenirs from their case files. Now sadly, as of this recording, the museum is currently closed down and hopefully reopening someday soon, but in the meantime, you can take a little digital tour. As this footage posted by the Warrens' son-in-law, Tony Spera, shows Ed Warren giving a guided tour of some of the more unique and memorable haunted artifacts resting in that Connecticut garage. Now the full video is definitely worth a watch if you're a fan of the Warrens, since it's about as close as you'll be able to get to walk around the museum these days. It's a full half-hour long of Ed Warren walking around, going into grand detail and recounting some stories about their more notable cases. Some shoutouts I'll include real quick include the witch Hannah Cranna, an old Connecticut legend, or the Conjuring Mirror, which might sound like it has something to do with the movie series, but actually refers to a bizarre case where someone used the mirror in a ritual to try and summon a demon and ended up inviting a poltergeist into his house. Ed talks briefly on some of their favorites, their cursed dolls and toys, such as a dinosaur from the Devil Made Me Do It case, and of course, no visit to the Warrens Museum could possibly exclude mention of Annabelle, who's basically the star attraction of the place and probably why anyone knows who the Warrens are and what keeps the lights on for so long. Annabelle is shown under a tight lock and key as Ed goes over her history of how they brought her in and first found her and how they eventually contained her. He touches briefly on her protocol, how she has to always be locked up in a storage box behind glass, surrounded by rosary beads and doused in holy water in an effort to keep the evil inside of her tucked away. And just a quick little small aside here from me. If a spirit is so powerful and so malevolent that it's able to possess a doll and contain unspeakable evil and attack humans, how is it thwarted so easily by a little bit of glass? I mean, I guess it's still a doll, it doesn't get demon strength, but I didn't know the solution for dealing with demons is the same way you deal with like a dog that's being kind of troublesome. You just put something around them until they can behave. Anyway, moving on.
In third place, we have the elusive White Lady of Union Graveyard. Some believe she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon afterwards. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. while others believe she is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband and later herself and is doomed to wander the graveyard. You tell me which one you believe. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. Thank goodness I'm not wearing white today. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, which hey, my kind of gal. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over, while others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, my favorite color, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that had made the hair on his arm stand up at a close distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with, you guessed it, long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brakes, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall, with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the two men search the area of the crash to check on the woman. Glenn is quoted as saying, "There was no red bodily fluids, there was no clothing, there was nobody, there was nothing." Located in Connecticut, Lorraine used to often take walks through the cemetery, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Ed caught the white lady on camera on September 1st, 1990 at 2:40 a.m., his 7th night in a row of filming at the cemetery, determined to have footage as proof, and we can show some of that footage to you now. He described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he said were wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. In second place, we have the Amityville Horror. On November 13th of 1974, Ronald DeFeo Sr., his wife, and 4 of their offspring, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John, had their lives ended by a firearm inside their home in suburban Amityville, New York. And at the time, homicide detectives claimed it was the largest number of victims in a single slang on Long Island. The deceased were found in their nightclothes and were shot in the back, apparently while they were asleep. There were no signs of a struggle inside the home, where a sign hanging outside the main entrance read, "High hopes." Sure. The killings were reported by the only surviving member of the family, the oldest son, Ronald. He told the police that he arrived at the home shortly after 6 p.m. but found the front door locked, so he crawled into the house through a window and stumbled across the icky scene. He later confessed that he had ended the lives of his family around 3:30 a.m., acting out the scenes for detectives as he described how he took out his family one by one, with the weapon eventually being found in Amityville Creek. Ronald's trial began in October of 1975. His defense attorney, William Weber, tried to make a case that the defendant, who allegedly heard voices, was innocent by reason of insanity, but the court eventually sentenced him to 6 concurrent 25-year to life sentences. Try saying that 5 times fast. Eesh. A year later, the Lutz family moved into the now abandoned home, and that's where this goes from simply tragic to much, much more. Most of the DeFeo family's furniture was still in the house, because it was included for $400 as part of the deal. You know what, I'd take that deal too. A friend of George Lutz, the father of the family, had learned about the history of the house and insisted on having it blessed, and at the time, George was a non-practicing Methodist and had no experience of what this would entail. Kathy, the mom, was a non-practicing Catholic and explained the process to him. George knew a Catholic priest named Father Mancuso who agreed to carry out the house blessing. He arrived to perform the blessing while George and Kathy were unpacking their belongings on the afternoon of December 18th, 1975, and went into the home to carry out the rites. When he flicked the first amount of holy water and began to pray, he heard a masculine voice demand that he get out. When leaving the house, the priest did not mention this incident to either George or Kathy until December 24th, when he called George and advised him to stay out of the second-floor room where he had heard the mysterious voice, which happened to be the former bedroom of Mark and John DeFeo that Kathy had planned to use as a sewing room, but the call was cut short by static. Following his visit to the house, the father allegedly developed a high fever and blisters on his hands, similar to stigmata. At first, George and Kathy experienced nothing unusual in the house, but the horrors that happened over the next 28 days were awful for the Lutz family, bearing witness to slime pouring out of their walls, strange odors throughout the home, and George would wake up at 3:15 every morning, which is right around the time Ron DeFeo carried out his original crimes. A garage door would open and close on its own, an invisible spirit knocked a knife down in the kitchen, a pig-like creature with red eyes was reported staring at George and his son Daniel through a window. Also, Kathy and 2 of her children experienced bouts of levitation while trying to sleep. The footage we have from this heinous month is of a boy with glowing eyes, believed to be the spirit of the late John DeFeo. By mid-January of 1976, after another attempt at a house blessing by George and Kathy, they experienced what would be their final night in the house. Now, the Lutzes were never able to give a full account of the events that took place on this occasion, describing them as too frightening. After getting in touch with Father Mancuso, the Lutzes decided to take some belongings and stay at Kathy's mother's house in nearby Deer Park, New York, until they had sorted out the problems with the house. They claimed the phenomena followed them there, describing greenish-black slime coming up the staircase towards them. Yeah, no thanks. And finally, in first place, we have footage of an American exorcism. While the video is blurred out on YouTube to protect the identity of the poor girl, I personally think it's up there as one of the most frightening things I've ever seen. At an hour and 20 minutes long, it depicts a Catholic bishop in Connecticut attempting to converse with a demonic entity that has possessed the body of an innocent young woman, while her family restrains her. Ed and Lorraine were the ones to alert the church to the possession after meeting her during an audience chat session that was held at the conclusion of one of their public presentations. During portions of the exorcism when prayer is done, you can hear the demon acting wildly, and it originally refuses to give its name, both of which are quite common in cases of demonic possession. Eventually we learn that there are 4 demons possessing our victim, with one of them identifying themselves as Robert, which happens to be a name associated with the son of Satan. I'll let a snippet roll now, allowing you to hear the woman for yourself. In 5th place, their origins in the profession. Honestly, before today, I never really dug too much into the personal lives of Ed and Lorraine Warren, preferring to focus my interest on their professional work, and only really knowing about their daughter Judy from the rare time they mentioned her in one of their books, and her husband because of all the rare footage he's publicized since Ed and Lorraine's death. Outside of the Hollywood romanticizing, which I promise I'll touch on eventually, how did Ed and Lorraine actually fall into this line of work? So Lorraine was 9 when she first saw auras. She thought everyone saw them, but found out quickly otherwise when she brought it up at her Catholic school, when she compared the lights surrounding the Mother Superior and Sister Joseph, and was told immediately to never talk of what she saw ever again, learning to, hide her gifts or joke it off. Ed, on the other hand, grew up in a haunted house. He'd look into closets and see faces, one specifically of an old lady. The temperature in his room would drop and he would hear footsteps and heavy breathing. When he brought it up to his father, he was told that, there's a logical explanation for everything, and just leave it at that. So they both did their very best to try and ignore their gifts, wanting to live normal lives, but the universe drew them together and had different plans. Ed had a near-death experience while serving in the Navy during World War II, when the ship he was on collided with an oil tanker in the North Atlantic. A fire erupted and all of the men on the ship had to jump overboard. As Ed was in the icy water, he prayed for help and was soon rescued, believing it to be from cosmic interference. So after that experience, he returned home and asked Lorraine to marry him, and they got married almost immediately. After the war, Ed took up a profession as a fine arts painter, with the duo traveling from fair to fair to sell their wares, and eventually this became helpful during the beginnings of their work. They would research houses they believed to be haunted, and then, go to that house. After Ed would paint the domicile, he would hand the painting to Lorraine, who would knock on the door and offer the homeowners the painting as, their ticket into the house. Once she struck up a conversation with the homeowner, they would learn more about the property and hauntings, if there were hauntings, that is. At one house, which already had, some local notoriety as a supernatural hotspot, Lorraine went into spontaneous trance and claimed that this is where she learned not to fear death. I thought there was more to that. In 4th place, we have the White Lady hoax. Just so we all have the same context going into this, the White Lady is the name of the ghost that haunts the Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. So most locals believe her to be the ghost of Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, with Harriet herself passing soon after. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. Other folks believe the White Lady is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband and later herself and is, doomed to wander the graveyard. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. So, me if I was wearing white, which will never happen here. I promise you that. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, which, once again, my kind of gal. Many who have witnessed her believe that they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. Now, Ed Warren was obsessed with her and has gone on record as being, determined to capture footage of her on film. Once he was able to do so, he kept the tape for himself. Yeah, he hoarded that tape like it held the secrets to the universe, or, like he was the US government with all the proof they have of alien life. He allowed a select few people to view it while, it was being held in his personal archives, and none were ever allowed to further analyze it on their own time. I'm raising an eyebrow right now in suspicion. And once again, if I had a red flag, I'd be waving it right here. So, since the passing of both Ed and Lorraine, their son-in-law, Tony Spera, has released the footage in its entirety to YouTube. The tape shows an apparent white human figure moving behind some tombstones. Similar to videos of UFOs, Bigfoot, and the Loch Ness Monster, the figure figure is at that perfect distance and resolution so a shape can be seen, but we don't have any details that could lead to a definitive identification. A woman named Judith Penny, who I will discuss in more detail later, has said she helped Ed maintain his reputation as a ghost hunter. So what does that mean? So when he claimed to have captured the white lady on tape in the summer of 1990 after camping out in the graveyard for a week, allegedly, Judith was the mystical being spotted on tape, masking herself with a white sheet.
Number 3. An exorcism. To some, the ultimate paranormal dream would be getting to ride shotgun with the Warrens on one of their cases, getting to experience the paranormal firsthand under the tutelage of those who have battled it their whole lives. It would be like if Obi-Wan Kenobi picked you up on some backwater desert planet and asked if you wanted to go on a great adventure with him. It would be awesome. Well, some people get to live their dreams every day. Like me, you know, my dream was to stand in front of a camera and talk about ghosts all day long. A YouTuber by the name of Haley Reese got the rare opportunity to meet Tony Spera, the husband of Judy Warren, daughter of the family, and Lorraine Warren a bit before she passed away, and she got a blessed look into some never-before-seen footage of the pair of demonologists conducting some field work, namely an exorcism. Now the person being exorcised, their name is Roberto, but they've been blurred out to protect their safety. Demon possession is one thing, but doxing is a whole other. We see Lorraine and Tony both fiercely conducting an exorcism, locked in a spiritual battle against the forces inside. We hear Tony asking for the demon's name repeatedly, not just because he's a friendly guy, he seems like he's pretty friendly, but because to properly drive a demon out of a host, you need to know its name. Well, just listen to what he answers with, it's gonna shock you. Beelzebub. Now there's a bit of discrepancy whether or not Beelzebub and the devil are considered different entities. Depending on the text you're reading or the mythology, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Either way, it's bad news. It's not something you would like to invite inside you. The worst part is if you're listening, apparently that's not even the only demon inside. It was like a clown car of demonic energy inside one guy. Now, thankfully, after a tough battle, they were able to get all the demons outside of him and hopefully banish them all away. Do you think it leaves like a weird taste in your mouth after you've had demonic possession? Like, you know, when you wake up, like after having a nap and your mouth just feels weird? I feel like I need to brush my teeth a few times at least afterwards. Number 2, Annabelle on tour. Annabelle is the #1 name in cursed dolls. Sorry Megan, we love you, but Annabelle's got staying power and she's just been here longer. More movies too, although on a side note, I'm hoping they make more Megan movies. As such, Annabelle has become quite popular, with a lot of demand for the cursed toy, despite the fact that, you know, she's got a demon inside of her and is apparently very evil, and she should be kept under proper lock and key. Did you know that there was a significant enough demand for Annabelle that she tours? Yeah, you heard me right. Annabelle tours. And you know what? I think that's great. Girl, get it. You gotta get that bag, you know? The movies made you a star, really propelled you to the world stage. It would be a shame to keep you locked up in Connecticut when your fans are waiting. A recent clip made the rounds on TikTok of a paranormal investigator, Eric Vital, transporting the allegedly haunted doll to take her to Perron, a convention for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts to break bread, swap stories, and pick up cursed goods. Founded in the Warrens' memory to carry on their legacy and establish a community of ghost hunters. Eric is part of the New England Society for Paranormal Research, the foundation created by Ed and Lorraine to further the development and research of the paranormal. Now this short video of him unpacking Annabelle got all kinds of attention on TikTok, mostly from people wondering why you would want to take her anywhere or why you would want to get your hands on her at all. I mean, inside the case she's carried and literally says do not open under any circumstances. Now Eric did understand this, and he assured that those who are worried that they take all the proper precautions, and that's not just putting Annabelle in a seatbelt. We take this very seriously, he said. Our faith is very strong, all of us. So we bless the van. We all have enormous amounts of holy water. We have a priest come in, bless the area, and bless the items. And maybe put her in a car seat too, just to be safe. And number 1, Buddhist exorcism. You know, it wasn't just the United States where Ed and Lorraine worked on their cases. If there was a call for it, the Warrens would do their best to answer. Plus, I feel like if you only ghost hunt in one country, you're missing out on so many good demons and scares. If you're a fan of the channel, then you know by now just how many really fascinating, cultural and regional monsters that exist out there and all the different ghost stories that exist. You know, you can spend your whole life battling demons, but have you ever gone toe to toe with a yokai or an oni? Maybe that's why the Warrens decided to take a trip to Japan in the early 2000s. Maybe they just wanted a nice vacation, or maybe they were getting tired of local poltergeists and wanted a new difficult challenge. They set out to Japan to investigate these allegedly haunted tunnels, where a number of people were reported to have died in. Ed was a former World War II Navy veteran, and he had spent a lot of time around Japan and was interested in their culture and the reports and things that he had heard. Of course, it was hardly a vacation, because while they were there, they were asked to participate in a Buddhist exorcism of a young woman named Teresa who had become the unwilling host to a litany of demons. They were aided by a group of Buddhists during their exorcism, a change of pace from their usual help from ordained Catholic ministers. We'll play it for you now so you can get some eyes on it. In the clip, we can hear Lorraine doing her level best to try and cast the evil out of the young girl's body. Now, the clip's a bit hard to watch, I'm gonna be honest. Seeing somebody writhe around screaming in what looks like agony, but luckily, they're being tended to by the experts, I guess. If there was anyone you'd want, it would probably be Ed and Lorraine and a group of Buddhists. Ed and Lorraine said the Buddhists were extremely helpful, saying they were cut from a different cloth. And if they're ever running out of Conjuring movies or running out of ideas for them, I think they should start sending the Warrens internationally. Or just stop pretending they're based on true stories altogether. Have the Warrens try to fight Godzilla, or have them fight the Predator or something. Let's see them exercise their way out of that one. Let's see holy water and a little rosary take on the Predator.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Buddhist exorcism.
破壊してはあなた自身も幸せになれないのだと今住んでる人たちのことも考えてほしいとマダム・ローレンが今言ってるウォーレンがわかる
In the early 2000s, the Warrens took a trip to Japan to check out these haunted tunnels that a number of people have died in. But while they were there, they were contacted to perform an exorcism on a woman named Teresa. This footage is very creepy. Not only is it actual footage of someone that is possessed, but you can also hear the demon in her voice reaching out to talk to Lorraine. In this clip I'm about to show you, Lorraine is trying to reach out to Teresa and get her to fight back against the demon possessing her.
Hear me? Teresa, you hear me? You understand me? Teresa, leave. Leave, Teresa. Leave, dear, leave. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you, Teresa.
Things take a turn when Teresa starts speaking in English to Lorraine. I should note that Teresa didn't know English, so clearly it was the demon speaking.
You see your mother? Go with your mother, Teresa. Go with your mother.
Go with your mother.
Go with your mother.
See your mother?
Do you see your mother?
Yes.
Mother.
Go with her.
She speaks English.
Towards the end of the exorcism, Teresa starts lashing out towards Lorraine and others. We see her crawling around and growling like a demon and talking all raspy.
I was here before. That's my house.
I guess the demon was really fighting back because poor Teresa was going through a lot at this point. The footage ends with Lorraine once again telling Teresa to fight back against the demon. Hopefully they managed to complete this exorcism successfully. Now, I tried to Google this case, but unfortunately there wasn't much information out there on it, so we may never know. In fact, it was after this trip in Japan where Ed got really sick and his health started to decline. Maybe this demon had something to do with it. Moving on to number 4, we have Scotland's underground city. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then why don't you hit that like button?
And today, they still are.
They're still haunted.
Yes. There are people like you that see them. In fact, I've never seen them, but there are people that see these ghosts floating about. Mary King's been seen up here, and she's been seen down at the bottom.
In 1996, Ed and Lorraine Warren visited Edinburgh in Scotland to investigate an underground city. The city was said to be haunted. In the video, you see an older tour guide telling them about the history of this underground city, how there used to be underground shops and stuff like that down there. At one point, he talked about getting bad vibes from being down there, and apparently Lorraine was sensing that as well.
So that's when you get the funny feeling.
I got funny feeling, all right. A
However,
very bad feeling.
one by one, they all died off until there was nobody left.
It gets worse when he talks about how everyone died down there and there were just piles of bodies because there was no one left to get rid of them. Which is probably why the place is haunted. I mean, a number of people died there and didn't have a proper burial. Well, at one point in the video, Lorraine claims she hears a ghost walking by.
Can't be.
No.
What are you hearing?
Like the sound of people, of more than one person together walking by, and, you know, like heavy clothing rubbing against each other, that type of thing I could hear.
I'm going home.
And I could hear that, and I wondered, you looked, Frank, so I thought you heard the same thing.
No, I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
That's not all. She started to pick up on another vibe.
It feels like somebody's like squeezing your insides all together, actually. Squeezing the life right out of you.
I have no clue how she wasn't scared to death experiencing all of that. Honestly, she was brave. It blows my mind.
In third place, we have Catholicism as an undercurrent. This is probably the only thing that has always bugged me, and while it might be less of like a secret in the gotcha sense, allow me to explain. Hauntings Ed and Lorraine spoke about were caused by people who refused to conform to traditional family values. Only people who submitted to the patriarchy and the church could be safe in their eyes. Their 1980 book, The Demonologist, kind of explains it all. That Ouija boards would get you haunted, but so would reading books about witchcraft, owning an image of a non-Christian deity, or attending conscious-raising groups. The horror in Amityville was supposedly aggravated when the unlucky homeowners engaged in the unholy pagan practice of, meditation. Addiction, depression, and disobedient children were all satanic. Hate, rage, despair, misery, drunkenness, and a sense of worthlessness will attract the demonic in a snap, according to Ed. One story in The Demonologist centers on a young woman who succumbed to evil after being fornicated with against her will. I do own this book, and I remember that not sitting super well with me. It was essential not just to stick with the status quo, but to be satisfied, with Ed going on record as saying, that a happy home is one's best defense, and even the most powerful exorcism will be effective only if you keep up an emotional atmosphere that does not attract such entities. And while I do believe this to an extent, not so far as Ed does. That atmosphere would involve going to church, by the way, saying that once a week was a good start. Yeah, I don't go to church. When you really think about it, the Warrens' entire basis of work kind of relied on victim blaming, evil that could, only happen to people who were already evil themselves. So personally, I don't agree with this whatsoever. Bad things do happen to good people, and not just because they don't follow Catholicism doesn't make someone evil. If you don't see what I'm seeing, allow another quote from Ed to help clarify things. People who do negative or patently unnatural things are essentially doing the devil's work for him, and actually attract negative spirits to their side. Ed Warren was the homophobic brand of Catholic. Yes, I'm fully aware that not all Catholics observe this, and while most do not, Ed fell under that specific strain that sadly does. As a queer gal who didn't fully learn this until today, it kind of broke my heart that people who were so open to helping others and the unknown could be so close-minded. In second place, we have fraudulent items in the museum. So Ed and Lorraine were investigating numerous cases from the 1950s until they passed, right? And they founded like a whole society devoted to the research and investigation of the paranormal in 1952. Not to forget their entire museum attached to their home dedicated to objects from their cases. So, explain to me how their website only has 10 public case files, and why so much from the museum looks like leftovers from a spirit Halloween. Doesn't anyone else find it pretty suspicious that we only get details from the really big news cases, while artifacts from other lesser cases are barely a footnote and have no story or witnesses attached? So in one corner of the Warrens Occult Museum is the skin of a tiger that is said to have killed 33 people in India while possessed by a demonic spirit. But yet, when I try to research this were-tiger, I find no account of any reportings in history about such a case, outside of, their quotes, or any offers from Ed and Lorraine to go into detail about any events leading to how it came into their possession. Seriously, Take a look at some of this stuff. Given what I know about modern day Satanism, that idol looks like a paper mache alien mock-up. Well, most folks who practice Satanism don't actually pray to any sort of idol, or to the devil himself. But sure, for a moment I'll pretend like that's real and move on to the, black magic skull, which just looks like a cheap haunted house prop for a glow-in-the-dark room. Ditto for the, chilling masks. You know what, actually that's a lie. I've seen cosplayers make better masks. I'm not going to even try to rationalize the skull with horns or the recreation of the Witch of Monroe. Y'all don't need to see me fuming right now. In first place, their personal life. So if you watch the film franchise, you'd think Ed and Lorraine had a pretty ideal, wholesome, perfect Americana family style life. But the reality isn't so shiny or pure, despite what, they preach all the time. In the early 1960s, Ed Warren initiated a relationship with an underage woman with Lorraine's knowledge. Ed was in his mid-30s when he met Judith, who was exactly half his age. Yucky. Having not yet gained enough fame as a self-trained demonologist to pay the bills, Ed was working as a city bus driver in Monroe, Connecticut, while Judith was a student at Central High School in the nearby town of Bridgeport, who, conveniently rode his bus route. The two began an amorous relationship, according to a legal declaration from Judith in November of 2014. Heck, by 1963, she had moved into the Warrens' home, and for the next 40 years, she had a sexual relationship with Ed with Lorraine's knowledge. That same year, Judith was arrested after someone reported her relationship with Ed to local police, because, busybodies everywhere, and she spent a night in the North End prison in Bridgeport while police tried to persuade her to sign a statement admitting to the affair. After she refused to cooperate, she was ordered by the court to report to a delinquent youth office for the next month. So, Ed, being the great guy he was, picked her up from school every week and drove her to the mandated meetings. Judith claimed that Ed told her many times that she was the love of his life. The Warrens explained her presence in the home as a niece or a poor girl who they had taken in out of charity and who helped them with office tasks. And she was mentioned in a lot of their books as being, like their secretary, most notably in The Demonologist, which I've already quoted a couple times today. What do you know? I own a copy. In May of 1978, while in her 30s, Judith became pregnant with Ed's child, and Lorraine persuaded her to have an abortion because the birth of a child could become public and any scandal could ruin the Warrens' business. Now, if that wasn't awful enough, Judith has also claimed that Ed was, on occasion, physically offensive to Lorraine. Judith described one night in particular where she saw Ed slap Lorraine so hard she lost consciousness. Early on, she said, she witnessed him backhand his wife. Well, it might be easy to dismiss all these claims as, hooey, or someone trying to make something out of nothing. There's an interesting element from Lorraine that kind of proves this to be true. So when Lorraine signed on to consult on the Conjuring movies, she got a contract that states that the movies will not feature negative information about the Warrens, mentioning specifically intercourse with minors, youngling bad videos, anything to do with women of the night, or sexual violence. Kind of weird to have to spell that out if you don't have anything to worry about. Now, this is where I was wondering, well, where was the daughter in all this? Judy is still very much alive. What does she have to say about it? She spent most of her years living with her grandma and not her parents, claiming that it was because her parents were always traveling, so it was the easier and safer option. Her parents told her that they took Judith Penny in so she could have a place to stay and watch their house. But their daughter could have helped watch the house if she lived with them. Just saying.
Coming in at number 5, we have Demonic Boy. You might have seen the photo of the Demonic Boy, but did you know that the photo was taken by Ed and Lorraine during the investigation into the Amityville horror? The photo is famous in its own right, with it showing a demon being caught on camera, meaning many did not know that it was from this case. The photo features what appears to be a young boy with white eyes who is peeking out of a doorway. Ed and Lorraine had set up an automatic camera that took infrared pictures to capture the second floor landing during the night. In the morning, when they checked through the pictures, they were shocked to see the little boy in the image. This remained a secret until 3 years later when it was shown to the public. But who could the boy be in this image? It is believed to be John DeFeo, the young boy who died in the home along with the rest of his family. Usually this would just be a guess, as you don't usually get a clear photo of a spirit, but if you compare the photo of the ghost boy to a photo of John DeFeo when he was alive, you can see that the spirit has the same features as the young boy. It appears to be bloody and possibly broken, but you can still tell that it is the same. The boy's hair also matches how it was when he was alive. It seems to prove that members of the family chose to stay within the home after they passed away. This could explain why the house is so haunted. Maybe they were trying to warn the Lutz's family not to stay there, or they might meet the same fate. Coming in at number 4, we have the DeFeo's furniture. When the Lutz family bought the house, it still had all of the furniture from the DeFeo's family inside. It all remained untouched since that horrible night. The Lutzes decided to keep all of the furniture so they could move in with it already to live in. The family even slept in the same beds that the DeFeos passed away in. Ed and Lorraine believed that the presence of the same furniture could be what caused the hauntings. The spirits were upset that there was a new family using that home. The spirits may have been attached to their beds where they had their last moments. This could even explain further into the demonic boy photograph. John DeFeo looked to be in pajamas peeking out from around his door. His spirit may have been resting in this bedroom when the camera awoke him and he went to investigate the noise when he was caught on camera. When hauntings occur, spirits often have attached themselves to an object, sometimes paintings, mirrors, or a creepy doll, so it seems likely that if you keep around the furniture of the family, then at least one member of the family will be attached to the house. This might have caused the Lutz's family to experience nightmares from sleeping in those beds and absorbing the spirit's fearful energy, as well as explaining the other horrors they experienced while living in the home. I don't think I could sleep there or keep any of the furniture if I knew what had happened.
In our third spot today, we have the family in Connecticut. And no, this isn't the same as the family from the haunting in Connecticut case. Just apparently, Connecticut has a lot of hauntings. So basically, Ed and Lorraine Warren went to Connecticut to help a family whose home was being haunted by a spirit. What I'm about to show you is real footage from this case. Basically, it starts with Ed and Lorraine sitting at a table praying with the family. Then, Ed tries to make contact with whatever is haunting their house.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
One knock for yes, two for no. Are you a man? Are you a boy? One knock for yes, two for no. Yes. Okay.
We couldn't tell.
Using that one knock for yes, two knocks for no method, Ed was able to find out more about this ghost.
Most here is it? Is it?
So the ghost was haunting their home and causing a scene because it didn't like the family's mother. But that's not the only ghostly thing that they managed to capture on camera. Later on, Ed asked the ghost to give them a sign, and then the kitchen chair moves on its own.
Give me some sign. Is that you moving something? Give me some sign that you're here. I command you to reveal your identity.
Yeah, no thank you. If that happened at my house, I would be out of there so fast. In our second spot, we have Maurice Theriault. If you've seen the movie The Nun, then you already know about a man named Maurice, or Frenchie. This guy was a hard-working farmer that ended up getting diabolically possessed. This occurred in 1985. Sometimes blood would randomly pour out of his body, like from his nose, eyes, and mouth. And he didn't know what was causing it. He also developed super strength and could randomly understand and speak Latin. At first he went to the police for help, then a priest, and then finally Ed and Lorraine Warren agreed to help him. Now, he apparently went through a number of exorcisms. The footage I'm going to share with you is from his last exorcism. So the footage starts off with Ed asking Frenchie to lift up his shirt. Apparently, random crosses would show up engraved in his skin.
At the front. Feet up in the shoulder? Yeah. Move, yeah, you're in the way, right? Yeah. Okay.
It literally looks like somebody took something sharp and carved crosses into him, and then it scarred up. But those would appear all over his body, randomly appearing and disappearing. During this exorcism, a number of scary things happened. For starters, we see him drooling from his mouth, but as soon as the drool hits his shirt, it turns to blood. Then, at one point, we see Frenchie hunched over in pain. This is apparently because spirits enter people through their solar plexus. And then, at At another point, we see Frenchie become incredibly still and his face changes completely. He doesn't look like himself. His eyes look so glossy. And lastly, we see a cut randomly appear on his forehead and start to bleed on its own, out of nowhere. That is absolutely horrifying. And in our number one spot, we have the unseen tapes. YouTuber Haley Reese got the chance to actually meet up with Tony Spira, the husband of Judy Warren. He provided her with insight into the Warren cases and actually showed her some unseen exorcism footage. She then uploaded this onto YouTube. In this video, we see Tony and Lorraine Warren performing an exorcism on a man named Roberto. Take a look at it.
This is the power, Jesus Christ. Okay? You hear me? Jesus Christ has all the power. You have none. What is your name?
So in the video, as you just saw, they're trying to find out this demon's name to then help expel it. And guys, you're not gonna believe what demon was inside of him. Here, continue watching.
What is your name?
Jesus Christ commanded you to answer that question.
What is your name?
What is your name? Beelzebub? Is that what you're saying? Beelzebub?
This dude was possessed by Beelzebub. When I heard that, I literally got shivers down my spine. Like, holy. So for those of you that don't know, in Christian texts, the name Beelzebub is often associated with the devil himself. They would alternate between using this name and Satan. He is considered one of the 7 princes of hell, and he is associated with the sin of gluttony. In other texts, he's described as the lieutenant of hell. He's second in power to Satan. It's crazy, but hold on. He wasn't just possessed by Beelzebub, but by other entities as well.
What other entity is inside you? God is commanding you. In the name of Jesus Christ, and all the saints, and all the martyrs, and all the angels command you to answer that question. What is it? Abaddon.
I genuinely don't know how they stayed so calm as this dude lists all the demons possessing him. The video went on and they found at least 4 demons were inside of him. They then asked the demons why they were possessing Roberto, and they replied with power.
Why are you in Roberto? Why are you there with Roberto? Jesus Christ doesn't like demonic spirits within a human spirit. Jesus Christ hates demonic spirits to be within a human being. You know that? You hate Jesus, huh?
I don't know about you, but that creeped me out. It is terrifying.
Number 5, Amityville. It's hard to say outright what the most famous Warren case would be. Annabelle, maybe? The Perron family that would inspire The Conjuring? If we're going solely on the amount of movies made based on one case, then it absolutely has to be the Amityville haunting. Amityville, Long Island was the center stage for one of America's most infamous and strange cases. In 1974, the house had been owned by the DeFeo family, until one day Ronald DeFeo Jr. went one by one with a rifle and ended the life of every member of his family, claiming that spirits and voices from beyond had told him to do it. Not even a year later, the Lutz family would move in, not particularly bothered by the house's dark history. I guess they were getting a great deal. During the first month of living there, they realized almost right away that something was wrong. Swarms of flies appearing everywhere, banging noises, and even seeing spectral apparitions of monstrous animals or phantasmal beings, you know, usual stuff when you move into a fixer-upper. The experts in the paranormal, Ed and Lorraine Warren, were called in to investigate the haunting to see if there was anything they could do. They brought with them camera crews and tried to record their findings, most famously finding a photo of what appeared to be the ghost of a young boy, replete with shimmering eyes staring down from the stairwell. It's actually pretty chilling. Now, it should be addressed that even by skeptic standards, there is a lot of debate as to whether the Amityville horror was closer to the Amityville hoax. George Lutz, the patriarch of the Lutz family, contacted the DeFeo's lawyer, William Weber, who said he was trying to get a book written up about the client, and Weber had later told news media that the haunting was all just a grand exaggeration that he had collaboratively made up with the Lutz family over a bottle of wine, in the hopes of getting a retrial and in the hopes of getting a bit of commercial success for the Lutz family. So I ask you, what do you think? Real example of America's most famous haunting, or just a scary story to sell some books and make some movies? And my ghouls and goblins, if you're looking for more terrifying true tales, or maybe true tales, from ghosts to cryptids to aliens and way more, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then like 10,000 videos on top of that. Drop a like, a subscribe if you'd like, and if you want to stay scared, you know where to go. Alright, moving on. Number 4, Enfield. Another very famous chapter from the Warrens' playbook was the Enfield poltergeist. While not quite as legendary as their other cases, it was still compelling enough to serve as the inspiration for the second Conjuring film. Now, this movie took a few liberties here and there, but for the most part was fairly inspired by the real case, so let's take a little look over as to what truly happened in Enfield all those years ago. It was 6 years after the Perron family haunting, all the way up in Enfield, England. The Hodgson family had been living there peacefully, one single mother, Peggy Hodgson, and her 4 children. It was the summer of 1977, when the youngest members of the Hodgson family seemed to be being targeted by some invisible presence. They saw the dresser of their bedroom sliding across the room as if a powerful force was pushing it all around. They would hear constant knocking from all over. The family had called the police, worried that there might have been a burglar, and when officers arrived, they claimed they arrived to a home where the furniture was free floating throughout the air. Over the course of a year, psychics, investigators, amateur and otherwise, all came to the Enfield house in the hopes that they would be the one to be able to crack this case and figure out just what was causing these mysterious occurrences. Of course, among them was Ed and Lorraine Warren. You probably could have guessed that's why I'm talking about it in the video. They were certain that they had on their hands another classic poltergeist scenario. Now, unlike the film, the story actually does differ pretty greatly here. In the real story, the Warrens were not terribly involved with the Enfield haunting at all. In fact, and were barely there for a few days even. There's even some reports that they were there strictly for media attention, saying to another investigator that we can make some real money off this case. Most of the investigators called believed that the case had been a hoax, and largely exaggerated and stretched by people involved. The Warrens thought they had a pretty good case on their hands, but was that because there was a real spirit? Or is it just because they knew they had a great plot outlined for a possible movie sequel in their franchise someday? In 1979, the Enfield haunting kind of just up and stopped abruptly. No more sightings, no more reports, and no one was ever really sure what had happened. Was it ever really there?
Coming in at number 3, they didn't plan to leave. Everyone knows that the Lutz family lived in the house for less than a month, but did you know that on the morning they left for the last time, they had always planned to return? They did not know that they were saying goodbye to their home and belongings forever. George Lutz said in one of his final interviews, I quote, "We didn't get up to leave that morning. You need to understand that. This was our house. We lived there." After a night that particularly frightened 2 of the children, the Lutz had said they had called a priest they had been in contact with throughout the ordeal, who encouraged them to go somewhere else the following night. They had at that point not slept through the night for weeks and thought it would be best to stay with family so everyone could rest. Instead, they ended up packing their bags from Kathy's mother's house, leaving the rest of their belongings in the house and boarding a plane for San Diego. Their belongings ended up later being sold at auction. They did not want to leave their home, but they were told that they had to. Once Ed and Lorraine were told about the events and were brought in to uncover the truth, they warned them that they could never return to the home for the sake of their family's safety. Apparently, if they had stayed much longer, their fate could have been the same as the DeFeos. The same spirits still plagued the house, and they might not have been able to fight them much longer, with them struggling to sleep, eat, and function to the best of their ability. Coming in at number 2, the DeFeos were all found in the same position. Although there are some who don't believe Ronald DeFeo Jr. was possessed, there are a number of things about that night that don't make any logical sense without the possible hauntings being involved. The first thing that seems like a satanic ritual is that every family member was found in the exact same position. The whole thing only lasted for around 15 minutes. So would Ronald DeFeo Jr. have had time to stage the bodies in the same position on each of their beds? Maybe or maybe not. This was something that the spirits within the house did once the act had been done. The police also determined that the rifle hadn't been fitted with a silencer, meaning that after one shot had gone off, the other members of the family should have been alerted to the attack. However, there was no sign of a struggle, nor was there any evidence that sedatives had been used to knock the victims out or keep them quiet. All of which is incredibly weird. So why did no one hear the shots? It seems there is no explanation for this. The only reason anyone was alerted to what happened was the family dog. He alerted the neighbors who called the police. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, the details of this case are undoubtedly strange. Ed and Lorraine believed there was a great evil within the home. They said they had never been so scared by a case. They commented on how powerful the spirits within the house were. They even followed them home after their investigation. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have second killer. There might have been a second killer who was never caught, but there might not have been. At this time, police and investigators considered the fact that more than one person may have been responsible for the attacks. It was the only way they could make sense of some of the more puzzling aspects of the crime scene. The existence of a second culprit has never been proven, although a documentary filmmaker claimed in 2012 that he had found new evidence supporting the theory. Katzenbach is working on his third documentary about the murders. He insists that he has the documents and the evidence to prove that there was more than one person responsible for the murders. How could a person walk through a 3-story Dutch colonial and shoot 6 different victims on 2 separate levels and no one get out of bed? No one put up a struggle, said Katzenbach. Other details about the case taken together add up to a second gun and a second shooter. Evidence like a photograph of a pillowcase found in a trash can next to the canal, along with a gun found at the bottom of the canal. The police were not convinced that there was enough evidence since Ronald DeFeo Jr. confessed to the case. It was a simple open and shut case and he was convicted. However, he did say the voices told him to do it. Could it be possible that he did have help, that the evidence isn't there for the police as the help was from an entity rather than a person? The entity would not have left fingerprints or evidence of any kind, but the simple fact that things have never added up make it extremely likely. Ed and Lorraine's findings within the house would also support this. They noted that there were a number of violent, powerful entities within the home, powerful enough to attach themselves to Ronald DeFeo Jr. and help him with his crimes.
In our 5th place position, we have my favorite creepy doll, Annabelle. Back when I was in high school, I actually got to portray her in a local haunted house, which was the beginning of my scare acting career. Hey, I promise I am quite terrifying if I want to be. I promise. For those of you who might be rolling their eyes right now, I'm going to refresh memories on the real Annabelle story. So feel free to cozy up and listen. Donna and Angie were student nurses and good friends who had decided to room together while in school. And for Donna's 28th birthday, her mom had gifted her a very large Raggedy Ann doll, something she was thrilled about. Personally, I'd react the same way. Let the record know that I'm always down to accept gifts of dolls or plushies. Soon after adopting the precious doll, Donna started to notice some weird behavior. She would leave Annabelle in her bed every morning behind her locked bedroom door, seating her the same way with her arms and legs crossed, and would come home at night to Annabelle having moved rooms and in positions that weren't possible. She's described a few instances of the doll kneeling, and speaking from experience, stuffed dolls can't kneel without falling for more than a few seconds. Donna and Angie then started finding notes left throughout the apartment, written on parchment paper in red pen. 2 things they didn't own. When Donna's boyfriend Lou started criticizing the doll, unexplainable handprints and scratches began appearing on his body. And that's when the girls made the decision to call a priest, who then brought in the Warrens. They were able to calm down the entity enough to remove it from the home and transport her to their museum, where she resides to this day. Now, the footage I'm talking about here is from the visitors who have visited Annabelle and her current residence over the years. If you look closely, you can just see the energy that's alive in her. Also, if she was never removed from her box until like the last few years, how is she able to change position ever so slightly from one video to the next? You tell me here. In 4th place, we have footage from a Buddhist exorcism. Known as parita, which can be translated as protection or safeguard, it refers to the Buddhist practice of reciting certain verses and scriptures in order to ward off misfortune or danger. The practice of reciting or listening to the parita suttas began very early in the history of Buddhism. The Mahavamsa contains the earliest historical reference to this practice, describing how Upatissa I instructed monks to recite the Ratana Sutta throughout the night during a period when Sri Lanka was afflicted by plague and diseases. In the Pali literature, these short verses are recommended by the Buddha as providing protection from certain afflictions. The belief in the effective power to heal or protect of the Sakakariya, or asseveration of something quite true, is an aspect of the work ascribed to the Parita. It is also widely believed that all-night recitations of Parita by monks bring safety, peace, and well-being to a community. Parita discourses can be recited at events like a funeral or on the death anniversary of a loved one, and can also be recited to placate antagonistic spirits. In 1987, Ed and Lorraine took a trip to Japan to offer their expertise in some cases that were ongoing in different parts of the country, with one of their stops being to a Buddhist temple. Describing everyone they encountered as lovely, Ed and Lorraine were shocked when they came upon not 1, but 2 people under possession. Ed described one as being under the influence of a snake demon, as they slithered around the floor constantly with their tongue darting in and out of their mouth. The possessed people were blindfolded, so the demons couldn't witness the rites, as the Buddhas went through the rituals and chanted around them. After the spirits were cast out, a bonfire was built to help guide them towards the afterlife. The footage we see is from a later round of prayers, which was held because one of the sets of spirits refused initially to depart from her attached soul. You can hear Lorraine attempting to guide the spirit out with the aid of a translator, coaxing Teresa to go on to the light and fly away, that her family was no longer here.
Number 3. The Perron house. This maybe is the most famous of all the Warrens cases, and definitely one of the most recognizable, as it was the case that inspired the first of the Conjuring smash hit films, and I'll be honest, it's probably why you even know who the Warrens are. I'm certain if you're watching this video or you've been a longtime fan of the channel, you know the ins and the outs of the Perron family haunting probably better than I do, to be honest. But hey, we could all use a little refresher and a little touch-up sometimes. There's nothing wrong with review, so let's get right into it. In 1971, the Perron family moved their 5 daughters into a massive farmhouse in Rhode Island. I think the thing had like 14 bedrooms or something just absurd. It seemed perfect for Carolyn and Roger Perron. They had found their dream home. It was spacious, it was a nice neighborhood, there was room for their kids to play. It would have been a perfect forever home if it wasn't for the fact that malicious spirits had already decided to make it theirs. Shortly after the parents moved in, they noticed a series of inexplicable happenings. At first it was pretty benign, you know, some things go missing, objects move unexpectedly, you find a chair in a room you wouldn't expect it to, but then it ramped up rather quickly. The parents would claim every morning they would smell the smell of rotten flesh, and they would wake up to discover their beds levitating, and you know what, on some mornings I'd probably sleep right through that too. The family researched the house a little and discovered that it had been owned by a lineage of one family for 8 generations, with many members of the family dying under some pretty mysterious circumstances. They also learned that a woman named Bathsheba had lived there, a possible Satanist and witch, and they believed that she was haunting the home, threatened by Carolyn Perron's energy, seeing her as a threat to her. This is when the Warrens were called in to do a seance, to try and commune with the spirits beyond. One of the Perrons' daughters claims that they saw their mother speak in tongues, possessed by the spirits. Now, in the film, they went a bit Hollywood with it. The Warrens perform an exorcism and Ed Warren saves the day. But the real story wasn't so neatly wrapped up. The Warrens were actually kicked out of this house by Roger Perron, who said that they were just making things worse and they were making his wife's mental health worsen. The Perrons would end up remaining living in that home for the better part of a decade. And you know what? Honestly, if rent was good enough, and if I could get those malevolent spirits to offer to, I don't know, help out with the dishes every now and again, maybe kick in a few bucks for Hydra and the internet, I'd probably be okay with it too. Number 2, the Southend werewolf. Now here is an interesting one for you. This is probably one of the oddest cases in the history of a pair of demonologists who made a career of exclusively investigating the most bizarre cases possible. It takes us back to England once more, this time in Essex. Now, unlike a majority of the Warrens cases, this wasn't a haunted house or a poltergeist, but it was someone claiming that they had been cursed with lycanthropy. A fairly innocuous carpenter, one William Ramsey, had claimed that since boyhood he had been cursed to transform into a werewolf. I am so jealous. It hurts so bad seeing someone live out your dreams. I wanted to be a werewolf more than anybody, and I didn't get it. He claims that it had plagued him his entire life, his first transformation occurring during boyhood. He was playing outside when he felt an icy breeze come over his skin, freezing his sweat in place. He said he then felt this primal bloodlust and hunger come over him and was overwhelmed by a pungent foul odor. He flew into a fit of rage and found himself tearing up a fence post with the fence still attached and gnawing at the wire mesh. You know, just regular stuff that kooky old kids do. For years, he thought it was just a very bizarre chapter in his life, something that came over a boy no one could explain. But in 1983, Will was out with friends when he felt it come over him again. He felt that freezing cold chill on his skin and excused himself to the bathroom. It's here where he claims he saw the face of a wolf staring back at him in the mirror. He called a cab home and claims he started to growl and try to bite his fellow passenger. The driver stopped the car, cause you know, I don't want a werewolf in my backseat either, and tried to get the raging man out of the back seat, and after minutes of thrashing, he finally calmed down. The years would keep going and William would do his level best to keep that inner beast in check. But it was in 1989, as his stories made the rounds of the tabloids, that caught the attention of Ed and Lorraine, who convinced William to travel to Connecticut to visit them for an exorcism. Initially, William was skeptical, which I find very surprising. You think that you're turning into a werewolf, but an exorcism makes you raise an eyebrow. Anyway, I digress. He ended up visiting, and reports claim that after a long night of violent thrashing, the wolf was exorcised from his soul. And since then, William Ramsey found peace. And number 1, the Smurl house. Bringing us back to a more classic haunting, the Smurl house is one of the more intense hauntings the Warrens took on. In 1974, Janet and Jack Smurl moved into a new house in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. They claim almost as soon as they moved in, they found themselves at odds with an invisible force that was terrorizing their family. They claim something was causing loud noises, horrible odors, and at one point, straight up launched their dog across the living room. Although maybe he might have found that fun. I don't know. I've met some dogs who were into stuff like that. The Smurls lived with this torment, I guess just assuming that dealing with a poltergeist was something every suburban family has to deal with in the 70s. It really seemed like it was a real problem back then. It wasn't until 1986, nearly ensuring a decade of haunting, that the Smurls thought it was time to call in some outside help, specifically from Ed and Lorraine Warren. When they arrived, Ed claimed the demon living inside the Smurls' home was very powerful, that it shook the mirrors and furniture when they arrived. Ed tried to scare it out by playing religious music and prayer. Sadly, this didn't quite work. I think you gotta try something a little heavier, maybe like Slayer, Megadeth. That might scare a demon, or they might find it awesome. Ed claims that he saw a dark mass forming in the home, something more powerful than he was expecting. He claims too he once saw a message appearing on one of the mirrors, warning the pair that they needed to leave. Months went by where the Warrens tried everything they could do to get rid of the demon, but nothing was taking. Eventually, it took in 1986 when a group of exorcists came to the house, and all took turns exorcising the house, and a priest even moved to the area, moved to the neighborhood just to keep an eye on things, make sure no demons were starting nothing.